a clown has come back to Derry with a slightly different deco. Here's your look at the NECA Toys It the Movie Ultimate Pennywise 2021 reissue. Seven friends engage in a struggle with a demon they first encountered 30 years earlier in their main hometown. Figure includes noisemaker, paper boat, 4 interchangeable heads, 7 interchangeable hands, and 7 balloons. Well, I guess we didn't have to wait the 30 years for the clown to finally come back. Funny enough, though, in the miniseries, it was 30 years, and yet in the original novelization and the remake, it's 27. Doesn't matter if it's a space of 3 years. What's, though, funny about it, it is actually a space of 3 years from the time that I first picked up this figure back in 2018 to the one that we're now looking at here in 2021. Somewhat ironic? I think it's somewhat ironic. The figure, though, of Pennywise stands at 6.5 inches in height, or the figure is 17 centimeters tall. Short story about this clown is that my local comic book store was doing a clearing out sale, getting rid of all old stock. I already had this Pennywise, but noticed that this one was 3 years later, and they were marking it down to an unbelievable price of $10. They were selling this one, and they were also selling as well the follow-up Pennywise that has the book with the 3D hand. I picked up both of them for $10 a piece. Now, again, we have already looked at this figure. I'm just going to slide over the one from 2021 and bring in the one from 2018. Now, you can see right away there's a big color difference between the two, as is usually the case when they do reissues. Not always to successful goals, but sometimes we do get ourselves slightly inferior figures that are painted a little bit worse in the reissues. But this is a case where definitely the reissue does do the figure better. With the justice now done of using metallic purples and the metallic greens you can see mostly in his sleeve and his clown collar, it definitely does improve upon the figure that I had 3 years before that. The same accessories come include with this Pennywise that got packed with the one that we've looked at before. The figure, first of all, comes with a series of different colored balloons. The balloons themselves all are individual, so if you were to pull one of them, for example, they all have a wire frame from the end of the knot all the way down, so you can bend these if you want to. I haven't yet actually taken the balloons out from the tray that came from the 2018 release, but this just show you the differences between the two. The 2018 balloons definitely are a lot shinier of a plastic. They have dulled down the color scheme on these, so I actually kind of like the fact that they're a little bit more of a matte color, because I think generally for me, I mean, obviously balloons, I'm sure you could probably find shinier balloons, but I just tend to think that balloons look a little bit nicer like this being matte rather than the shinier plastic. Again, just to grab another one, what's a good example here? Let's grab the blue balloon. Everybody likes blue balloons. You can see again, like there's a difference. Not only that, but it also looks like it's slightly more translucent on the 2018 balloons versus the newer ones that we get here. Again, newer ones, I don't know if there's actually any other newer reissue of Pennywise than the 2021. I checked online just to kind of hope to see if there was a newer one after that. I'm sure if there is one, the guy behind the camera is probably going to be eventually picking that one up. But the thing that's neat about the balloons, let's grab the more famous red balloon. Just grab that right now. Again, it's got a wire frame. He does come with one hand specifically for just holding a singular balloon. You can see that this one only has just almost a pin size hole there. And you just take the end of the balloon and just feed this through. I haven't yet done this, honestly, with this hand, although I've done it with the original Pennywise. So if you have, for example, slippery fingers, it might not be the easiest thing to get this actually in his hand. But you basically just guide it through until it gets out to the other side. Now, Pennywise has already come with these hands already before. The one other thing that he also comes included with, speaking of holding balloons, as I did do at the beginning of the review, he also has a gripping hand specifically for holding pretty much all the balloons. Everything that you saw at the beginning of this review when the figure was first on the turntable is all of the balloons already wrapped in there. It's just a case, again, of grabbing a whole bunch of balloons, just putting all the twist ties together here, and with all the wires together, you basically just guide it in between his fingers. You don't even have to do these individually either. At the beginning, when I was just trying to get all the balloons in there, all I did was just grab the whole bunch of balloons at the same time and just fit them in between his hand. And he holds all of them fine. The only downside, though, to it is, while some of the balloons, especially if you have them, with lesser numbers, they sort of flop around a little bit more. And also, as well, like if you're putting this in his hand, the weight of the top of the balloons does cause the hand to spin just a little bit. But they do succeed in actually getting all in his hand. I just don't think I'm probably going to be displaying it, I think, with all the balloons. I just think it just makes the hands way too loose for my liking. So he comes with a couple of those. He also comes with a pointing hand also as well. And again, these are all been painted, I'm guessing more so than actually just molding in plastic. Actually, you can see kind of the way that the peg is. There's a little bit of flaking of paint there. So they probably would have painted all the hands individually. The figure also has coming included with him some monster hands. The original figure, in fact, actually I wanted to grab, this is a good example. I wanted to bring in the original hands. You can see that they're slightly lighter of a green than the ones we get now. This hand, funny enough though, is a more closer of a grip. I'm sure I probably just would have stretched these, or maybe even putting them back in the packaging, or maybe, hey, why not? They may have also come out of the tray looking like this. This one is, again, a little bit more closer together of a C-clip or C-clamp, but the colors, again, on this one, a little bit more of a vibrant green than the duller green that we got with the 2018 release. You get also as well a secondary hand, which again, just bring in the other hand so you guys can see. There seems to be also a little bit of brown also added onto the green that isn't there present on the 2021 reissue. The figure also comes included with the noisemaker. The noisemaker sadly doesn't actually turn. I mean, well, actually it does turn. I was worried thinking if I was going to turn, I was going to just twist the peg right off, but it seems to be the case that you can turn it. The noisemakers look, though, identical. I don't think there's really much difference. Maybe this one looks a little bit more brown than this one. They look pretty close in color scheme, though. The figure also comes included with Georgie's boats. Now, the boat itself is made of paper, which, you know, again, like looking at the material and obviously realizing that the boat in the movie is made of paper, I mean, I can't fault the fact that NECA decided to do this in paper. Here's, by the way, the original SS Georgie, you guys can see. Like the printing, if I just flip this around, actually you can almost even make out more of the newspaper here on the original one. It's a little bit more faded here on the newer Georgie's boats. But again, they're made of paper. So again, mileage may vary as to how long that boat is going to last. I mean, obviously it's just folded up piece of paper. The figure also comes included with a whole bunch of series of interchangeable heads. One of the really neat things about this figure release was the fact he had 4 interchangeable heads right out the gate. He didn't have an accessory pack like the remake, for example, had. He just was released with a whole bunch of different heads. Now, the head right now that I have him with is basically kind of more the just neutral expression. He kind of just generally looks like a pretty ticked off clown. Just grabbing off the ones to the side, not knocking anything off. You can see, like, color-wise, the color of the red is the biggest thing that stands out to me. You can see like the 2021 reissue, for example, doesn't have as bright of a red as the original one. So maybe if anything, like the head sculpt on this one might do a finer job of giving him a brighter hair coloring. Face-wise, though, you can see, like, I think like the eyes are outlined a little bit nicer on the one that was 3 years later. The nose seems a little bit more vibrant too versus the one here. But I mean, like, obviously the head sculpts are going to be exactly the same. Maybe as well, while we're holding both figures in hands, you can see as well the coloring between the two costumes is very greatly different. Vest, you can definitely see there's a lot more silver here. With the original one, there was a lot more green. But more importantly, you can see really the biggest difference being the sleeves. They went with more just purple and green or a purple and teal color for the original release and matched that color nicely here in his clown collar. The newer one, though, swaps that out. And again, saying newer one, it's 3 years ago that this figure still came out. But you can see, again, like improvements are definitely there between the two. I do really like the use of the metallic now being used on this figure. And again, while I may mix and match some of the component pieces with the original release to the newer one, depending on how I want to have the figures displayed, I do think like the clown costume is by far, my takeaway at least, it's the better of the two on this release here. I really like the use of the metallic. The coloring of the yellow is a lot more brighter too. I mean, it seemed almost like this one had almost like it was painted over top of a darker plastic and some of that darker plastic bled through. Whereas the one that was 2021 definitely gives us a much brighter looking yellow. It really is a nicer looking body, really between the two. And like when it comes to his head sculpts, he comes with 2 or 3 other head sculpts. One of which being, I've just put the other Pennywise over off to the side here. One of which being the laughing Pennywise. Now, say what you will about Skarsgård's version of Pennywise, who was quite an evil, scary-looking clown. There's something to be said about the fact that Tim Curry was basically just wearing makeup, and he was just very terrifying in the miniseries. This is, again, a laughing version of Pennywise, and just to reach off to the side, I'm going to do my best to bring in all the ones so you guys can see. Yeah, with this one, funny enough, it's hard to even make out on the original one where his eyeballs would be, more specifically his pupils. This one, you can actually see a little bit more of his eyeballs visible. The mouth is also a little bit more nicely colored. This one has a little bit more of a red around the area of his lips. But I think like between the two, even though again, like I think I like the color of the hair more on the 2018 release, I think the face sculpt is still superior on the one from 2021. Like also as well, the figure comes included with the surprised starry-eyed face sculpt. again, terrifying. You can see the way they've colored the eyes very nicely yellow, and then you've got the little tiny diamond triangular shapes there just above that paint nicely in blue. Just to grab, again, the one from the 2018 release. I'm not going to keep commenting on the fact that I still think the hair is a lot better on this version than on this version. It's just going to carry over for each of them. Head sculpt, again, like this one has a little bit more redder eyes. This one doesn't have as much of the red eyes. This one also has a lot darker, as you can see there, of the eyebrows. This one paints the eyebrows with a much finer pen line. So I think like this one might look a little bit better. This one has richer colors for it. And then the last one is the fact that he does have the burnt side of his face. Battery acid. And then, of course, we can bring in the other one. This is really where you see the biggest differences, overlooking, of course, the brightness of the red. But the biggest thing being, you see the scarring on the side of his face. Almost looks like they just watered down paint and brushed it across the side of his face. Whereas this one actually does really give us more the idea that this is burnt into his skin. Definitely a better looking head sculpt between the two. I think this is the nicer of the two. And again, if you wanted to change the heads out, not the easiest thing to do. I mean, with 3 years separating the two figures apart, you would think that they would have changed the system from, instead of using a ball joint, which unfortunately this figure still has, they would have instead replaced it with the post. The post is always the easiest thing to change. Pennywise, unfortunately, still suffers from having a very large ball joint. So it's not the easiest thing, unfortunately, to change the figure head sculpt out. I would always really recommend, if you're having this figure for yourself, heat the head, please, in hot water. I've heated a couple of the heads. Funny enough, though, the one I didn't end up heating was the one I ended up changing the head out to, is this one here. I did end up heating this one, thinking that that was the one I was going to change in the review, and sure enough, it wasn't the one I ended up using. But again, like, you can change out the heads. It's just, again, not the easiest. You can either run a few passes with the hairdryer. You can also as well heat this in hot water, just to submerge, like, just basically take the bottom of the neck, sit it inside like hot water. You don't have to do that with the entire head, but just enough to soften up the socket that when you put it back down onto the ball joint, it's a little bit easier to do. And actually, funny enough, though, I noticed with this head sculpts, and actually all of them, they seem not, they're still going to be difficult, don't get me wrong, but they seem like they sat a little easier onto the ball joint. I just wish, though, that moving forward, if they ever do another release or another reissue of this, I mean, obviously, it's just going to be a case that they're going to use the same mold again and just probably paint it a little bit differently. But I really wish that this figure, right from day one, could have had the post rather than the ball joint. It just would have made things so much more simpler. Now, for the articulation on the figure, if you already have the earlier Pennywise, then you already know by now the articulation that goes along with him. The head's going to be on a ball joint. It does move back and forth. It looks up, it looks down, but moving the head back ultimately just results in the head popping off. The clown collar, by the way, is a separate piece. So when you do take the head off, make sure that the collar doesn't fall off and land on the floor. Show of hands, how many people actually had that happen to them? The figure has an upper torso ball joint. Yes, it does. You can also as well take the arms and hinge them out at 90 degrees, almost 90 degrees. You can take as well those arms and rotate them all the way around. Double hinge on the elbow, 1 and 2. The hands also as well rotate all the way around. Pennywise's legs, as big as they may be, do split out quite far, actually. That's as far out as you can get the figure's legs. Maybe a little bit further. You can take as well the legs, move them forward. You can move them back. This, by the way, is all softer plastic. The original Pennywise also had that as well. It just makes things a lot easier when it comes to moving the legs forward and back. But what it ultimately also does, too, is that this basically is just a little lip of plastic. They did it in such a way that instead of connecting the two parts together just because the legs would be so close together, what they did instead is sort of cheated by putting a little lip of plastic here. So you can see, it sort of just hangs out the bottom area here. And when you are moving the leg forward, it does lose some of the illusion of the actual clown pants being all one piece. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh. The figure does also have a single hinge in the knee, allows the lower leg to rotate. And then for the ankle, like the original one, it rocks back and forth this way. And there's also a nice ankle rocker. You know, it was one of those ironic things when you really think about it. I mean, I think it's more ironic probably than what you guys think. But like getting this figure and finding him at my store, my local comic book store that was just again clearing out the lots. I think had it not been the case that they were clearing out the figures, I probably would have never even considered the idea of picking up another Pennywise. I always seem to think of reissues more as Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, and Freddy Krueger, and seem to tend to overlook characters like It the Clown. And yet, though, looking at Pennywise here, had it not been the case that they didn't mark the figures down to $10, and then I wouldn't have not grabbed this one and then the other Pennywise, I would have not even realized the color scheme variations between the two. Again, approaching the original figure from 2018 with kind of more just neutral colors of the teal and the purple, jazzing it up now nicely with the metallics, does give us two completely different looking Pennywises. The benefit also of this as well, too, is that if I don't decide I want to use any one of the heads from the original 2018 release, of course, because the heads are still using the same size diameter peg hole, I can easily just mix and match the heads until I get two perfect Pennywises on the shelf instead of just the one. I still find it ironic that the original Pennywise I picked up was 2018. This newer one from the comic book store was 2021. That's a difference of 3 years. In the miniseries, though, Pennywise comes back and kills every 30 years, yet the original novel by Stephen King and the follow-up remake has it at 27 years. That's a difference again, 3 years. Coincidence? I think it's just more a coincidence than anything else. It's probably also a coincidence I just happened to go to this comic book store. I say sometimes local comic book store, but there's often ones I go to that's off the beaten path. This one isn't one that I go on a regular basis, but when I do go to this certain store, they often mark a lot of their figures down for the ones that they just can't get rid of. It just happened to be the time that I went in this one time, and they were marking all of their NECA figures down. Not all of them. All the newer ones they still had in stock for the regular prices. But then they marked all the ones that I guess they couldn't just get rid of. Some were being marked down to like $25, which if you are one that shops for NECA figures here in Canada, tend to expect to pay about $50 to $55 a piece, sometimes even $60. So getting any figure, a NECA figure for $25 was already a steal, but they were ones I already had. I mean, and just looking at, like when I go to look at NECA figures in local stores, the first thing I check out is the lot number. The lot number will tell me whether I already have the figure. Like if I just pick up the figure a year ago and I see like the lot number is around a year's difference, I'm probably not going to be picking it up because I don't know just off the top of my head if there's a color variation between the two. But with this one, I knew that the Pennywise I had was several years older, so I decided to pick this one up, and what a pleasant surprise it was to find out that this clown was painted differently. Painted better as well. Not always the case that a reissue ends up turning out better. There's been some that we've looked at that I actually still prefer the older versions of that figure instead. But this peasant Pennywise was a pleasant surprise. Actually, instead of just having the purples and the teal color striped on his sleeves, they actually instead painted it in metallic finish, and it definitely does show. While I do think like the head sculpts, the hair on the original ones look a little bit brighter in the red, I think the face sculpts are more defined on the newer release. And again, by saying newer release, it's 3 years ago. Oh, look at that. 2018 to 2021, the difference of the two Pennywise was 3 years. This figure is 3 years ago that it came out. And the difference between the miniseries and the remake, 3 years. 3, 3, and 3. Coincidence? I don't know. You guys let me know down below in the comment section. Have you guys ever picked up a reissue NECA figure? And has your experience with that been positive, negative? Have you noticed it was just exactly the same? Or did you also notice that maybe like the reissue didn't do as good of a job of painting it? I think the Pennywise in this case, 3, 3, and 3, was actually a better looking figure, and I'm glad that I picked this up. Thing about it though is that I did also pick up another Pennywise, and I'm looking at the lot number on the bottom of that. It's 2020. The one I originally have is 2019. That's only a difference of 1 year. I don't know if 1 year is really going to make much of a difference, but we will certainly find that out when I end up looking at that figure. In the meantime, though, if you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, 3, 3, and 3, it's got to be some connection somehow. What does 3, 3, and 3 mean? 3 little pigs? Maybe? I don't know. If you guys certainly did want to stick around for more, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and you're turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.